In February of 2024, I posted this picture to my Instagram. I had finally completed a goal I had started the year previously, which was to read all of Neil Gaiman's bibliography, including even his children's books. I called him the GOAT. I made a video ranking all of his novels. Only 5 months later, the first accusations of abuse by Neil Gaiman would come out. This revelations would leave me reeling, and I've spent months thinking about it. I'm not really one who likes to react. I like to spend time thinking about things, and I usually have no problem putting out a video long after the news tide has finished. And I debated back and forth whether or not I was even going to address it. It seemed like a lot of other people had. Only a week or so ago now, new allegations came out, and they were so horrifying I couldn't even finish reading the article. And after all of this thinking, I just felt really compelled to say something. So yes, this is a Neil Gaiman video, but also in many, many ways, it just absolutely isn't about Gaiman at all. If you're here to find out the details of what happened, you are not going to find them discussed here. And honestly, as I admitted before, I couldn't even tell you all the details if I wanted to because I couldn't finish the article. This is a video about our relationships to authors, artists, and celebrity. This is a video about morality in fiction and whether the books we read need to be moral. It's about art and how it influences us and what that means. I'd like to state up front that my heart goes out to the women that Gaiman has abused. I believe them, I support them, and I hope they can receive any sort of justice that's possible after being treated that way. If you asked me if I worshipped celebrities, it would be really easy for me to say a resounding no. It is just not something that has ever really caught my attention, and I have been told I live under a rock more times than I can count throughout my entire life. Other than like maybe one or two, I just never really have been interested in that kind of fandom or celebrity gossip. Even my favorite authors, I tend to know very little about. I often know a lot about the process of writing the book or a lot about the characters and worlds on the page, but their life in particular, unless I have learned it for a specific reason, like I am doing an interview, I just generally don't really care and don't really look into it. I do feel like that's a little bit also more common for people who admire authors' works than other types of celebrities, like particularly actors. I feel like in general, you don't as often fall in love with an author for their personality on like talk shows or things like that. Like generally authors don't have that kind of heightened fame. So I think it's pretty common, at least from what I've seen, for readers not to really think much about the lives of the authors. That might not be true. It's just something I've seen in general versus like actors or musicians. And I'm sure with the advent of social media that has changed. I have seen, authors with some followings get book deals out of it because of their personality. All of this to say is that scandals revolving celebrities come out fairly often, and I've always felt decently removed from them, even if I watched or participated in the art by that person. Perhaps I might have been surprised by a reveal, especially if I feel the themes in a person's works are directly at odds with their opinions, but I've never necessarily felt like shocked or moved. I've mostly just kind of rolled my eyes and been like, yeah, a lot of celebrities suck. So why, when the Gaiman news came out, did I feel so utterly betrayed? I felt betrayed as if it was a person I had personally known. I felt so much anger on behalf of the women who were treated this way, anger at Gaiman for daring to act this way when he had written the words he had written. If you had asked me mere moments before that news was dropped, do you worship or revere any celebrities? I would have said no. I would have said, oh, are there celebrities whose work I appreciate? Are there celebrities who I generally like? Yeah, of course. But people I revere? No. And yet, I've done a lot of thinking about this phenomenon since this news dropped, and I think I've come up with some ideas, some answers to why it might feel this way. It's one thing to fall in love with somebody's fantasy writings. Although we know that influences and parts of who the author are obviously going to bleed into their fiction stories, and it does say something about who they are. When it's fiction, there is this level of removal. There is this step removed that it is not a direct one-to-one author to words. There's a buffer in between there. I had not only fallen in love with Gaiman's fiction, but I had, on the record, raved and raved about his nonfiction essays, his nonfiction true-to-life works that were talking about him as a person, that were with no buffer or illusion of a separated link between fantasy and life. I had stated that stuff he wrote in that novel changed my life. Just really connected with me. I love his writing. I love what he had to say. The reason this is in my list this year particularly is because some of the things Neil said in here I think have actually altered my outlook on things permanently. That feels really important to me. Like when I read something that kind of alters how I behave and act, feels really important. In short, whether I recognized it in these words or not, I had started to admire him as a person. So now, after this revelation, what did that say about me as a person? Now, most rational thinking people would say it means nothing. I've seen a lot of bad takes on the internet, and I don't think I've seen a single person saying, wow, you were secretly a bad person because you liked Gaiman's works and now he's turned out to be a monster. I've never actually seen anyone say that. But what I have heard people say, and what I have seen a lot in these sort of author controversies, of which there have been many, is people saying, well, the work actually wasn't any good anyway. Gaiman's actually a hack writer and he wasn't good and none of his works were good and here's why they actually have always sucked all along. And wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be easy and clean and tied up with a bow? We wouldn't have to sit in this really difficult emotion of someone I really admired and who I thought made really good art is a terrible person. Early last year, I was reading through a collection of essays called The Language of the Night by Ursula K. Le Guin. It is a collection of essays that was republished recently. And a lot of these essays discuss morality in fiction. And I have been thinking a lot about it in relation to Le Guin's words. And although I won't be quoting anything directly from the book in this video, a lot of the ideas I've been forming came from ideas that were presented in this book. I actually started researching a lot and working on a video script about morality and art because of this book, and it just kind of never went anywhere. I just never really felt like I got a full video out of my musings. Part of the reason that video didn't go much is that a lot of it was just questions, and I think a lot of the questions are very relevant here. Does artwork have a responsibility to be moral? And as readers, what is our responsibility to only engage with moral art? What about only engaging with moral individuals and creators? At what point and how much can you criticize a piece of art that is attempting to be moral? Does criticizing a moral piece of art mean you disagree with the message? How does the internet change the way we present ourselves and the way we feel we need to give a picture of our moral standings when it comes to art? Unfortunately, the more I tried to research these questions, it felt like it led to just more and more questions, but I'd love to still discuss them today, even if there aren't definitive answers. First is the idea that the definition of moral may be very difficult to pin down if you're among more than just a handful of people. Does morality look the same to an atheist and a Christian? Does morality look the same to somebody who grew up in the US versus someone who grew up in the Netherlands or Australia or China? How much does our lived experience influence what we call moral? In that, we can rarely decide morality for the entire world, but mostly just decide morality for ourselves. To be clear, I'm still talking about morality within the work itself, not the author who wrote it. I don't think anyone would be trying to claim what Gaiman did was moral, but within works itself. In some ways, morality of an author may be an idea that's easier to pin down than morality within artwork, because does amoral actions within a novel make the work itself amoral? Of course not. I thought Britannica actually put it very well in their discussion on morality in art. How does literature achieve this moral effect? It presents characters and situations through which readers can deepen their own moral perspectives by reflecting on other people's problems and conflicts, which usually have a complexity that the reader's own daily situations do not possess. Readers can thus learn from these characters without themselves having to undergo the same moral conflicts or make the same moral decisions in their personal lives. Readers can view such situations with a detachment that they can seldom achieve in daily life when they are immersed in the stream of action. Literature can be a stimulus to moral reflection unequaled perhaps to any other, for it presents the moral choice in its total context with nothing of relevance omitted. And I really feel like all of that is true, but where the sticky part comes in is how much does a character's amorality in a novel reflect on the morality of the author? And this is maybe why a thing I've talked about in other videos, where authors feel the need to make a statement exactly how they feel about the themes and characters in their work recently and leave the subtlety behind because they want to make sure people understand that these character actions are not what the author themselves think. And so that gray line can also be difficult because, as you guys know, I don't always think it's the best for a work of art if you have to tell people exactly what you mean. For me, the books that really make you wrestle, that really make you think, are the ones that have stuck with me the most and changed me the most. But that still doesn't actually answer the question I asked, which is art required to be moral? Does it matter? A difficulty in this is really understanding how much art directly influences the consumer. We have very little statistically robust ways of actually measuring the effect of literature on people. There have been countless surveys, but again, not necessarily statistically robust. We cannot in good faith say that the things that we consume in terms of media do not affect us, and yet at the same time, we can also laugh at old moral panics that we find a little ridiculous today. For example, of the 70s and 80s, the moral panic that if your children played Dungeons and Dragons, they'd turn into Satanists. But if art has zero effect on us, then it by necessity has zero need or zero obligation to be moral. But the idea of what we read having zero effect on us, in my opinion, is pretty laughable. So then what is the measure of necessity of what we read to be moral? Should art be moral in some way? And if so, who decides what that morality is? What is the definition of it? Ultimately, it's clear. It comes down to the consumer. You yourself has to decide to what level your artworks that you read need to be moral and what that morality is defined by. This is a large and complicated conversation, but I think ultimately we can boil it down to ultimately the consumer decides what is moral for them and what they are going to choose to read. We don't really have the time or maybe even the expertise today to talk about the larger topic of if all books should be moral in some way. However, when we move into the creator of the art, or the author in this case, and their need to be moral, things get a little stickier. And in my opinion, it's because we don't know a full author's life. An author's life, they are a real person, they are not like a book. In a book, we have all the facts, because those people do not live outside of the pages. So the facts we need, the facts are the facts we have on the page. We can never truly know an author unless we know them personally. We know them through their works and perhaps their online presence and persona. We hope the big horrible things will come out and we can find out if the authors have done a lot of bad things. And certainly in this age of information, it's probably more likely now than it used to be. But there's also a huge chance that some of these things will completely go under the radar and never be reported on. Perhaps it'll be reported on, but so little that you'll just never hear about it. Perhaps like me, you rarely put any research into your authors, and so you'll just miss the conversation happening. Unless it's very big news, like Gaiman's making huge headlines, you'll just miss it. It's also possible that some people don't care. It's possible that some people don't care about the creator of the art being moral for whatever that means to them. And it's also just as reasonable to assume that people don't want to give their money to people they feel like are bringing active harm to others. I think in general, as humans, we desire it to be clean. We desire it to be easy. We only want to like art from good people. The obvious issue with this, which I've talked about in a previous video, so I won't go into a lot of detail here, is that it may feel like a never-ending cycle, like a never-ending whack-a-mole. Once you hit one person, there's always someone else popping up. And what about, authors are a little easier because usually books are created by mostly one person, but what about movies that are created by a host of individuals? The amount of research that would require, and could you even research it, and would you even know? This is not to say you shouldn't ever act, of course not. I'm just saying it can snowball very quickly. Another side of this, much different than speaking about morality within the art itself, is this thing that I have noticed that because of the internet and the way we interact on the internet, often the morality of the author is now being put on and compared to the morality of the reader in a way that usually thematic elements within a book itself has never been. In fact, I've noticed it's almost started becoming required for anybody on the internet talking about books in any capacity to make statements about how they feel about an author, particularly obviously about an author's controversies. Perhaps if they mention a book they like and they know that the author is out of favor for things that they have done, they will feel the need to make a statement about it before they talk about the book. Perhaps if new controversies come out about an author and new information comes to light that is bad, they will feel the need to make an official statement about it, about where they stand, or make a video about it. It's actually something I started noticing several years ago in my online life outside of my book life, just like in my regular online social media with just like the people I know and my friends. I started noticing that every world tragedy, every event that was happening in the news needed to be commented on, and that me and my friends were often reposting the exact same kind of like news articles or quotes or what have you about these events to make it clear and to make sure everybody knew in our internet life exactly where we stood. And who am I if not participating in that very culture as we speak right now? Is that not part of what this is? Is that not part of me aligning myself against Gaiman and to let you as my followers know how I feel about it? A year I remember participating the most in this sort of thing in my own life, and when I really started thinking about this and engaging with this, was 2020. Now, obviously 2020 was a very difficult year for everybody around the world, but living in the US, we also had quite a bit of civil unrest going on, and there was just a lot of posting about what was happening and news articles and kind of aligning yourself and letting people know like exactly where you aligned on so many issues. And I remember starting to feel so overwhelmed by how much it felt like I needed to comment on, and also incredibly empty. I began feeling so hollow as I noticed my friends and I reposting each other's same exact posts over and over and over again. And what was I really actively accomplishing? As I examined this hollowness, I started to realize that a lot of it stemmed from the fact that I didn't feel like I was actually having any actionable effect. What was I doing that was really measurably changing any of the things I supposedly said I cared about? Now, I'm not saying raising awareness isn't important. I think obviously raising awareness has a lot, and informing has a lot to do. But was I the person to do that? Was I the person to my 100 Instagram followers who already were posting the same things? Was I really informing anybody? Was I really spreading information or creating awareness or making any sort of measurable change in any way? This was hollow, empty, and meaningless activism that was mostly, I guess, to just make myself look good on the internet. So I made a decision. I decided that if I ever was going to post about something, I had to have an action that backed it up. So if I was going to post about something I didn't like, I one time found a way to contact my representatives and talk to them about it. I found charities to donate to that were directly helping the thing I was posting about. I one time found a mom group who was getting together to for this other political reason that I was aligned with. And I noticed as I started to do this, my desire to post just like completely went away. Suddenly, I didn't really care that much about aligning myself on the internet. I started feeling so much better and so much less hollow when I was instead just taking an action, even if it was small, even if it was just contacting my representatives, even if it was just contacting a group, just donating. It felt like an action that could at least have a drop of an effect. And I've kind of started to feel the same way about these kind of things on BookTube. When a controversy comes out, I'm starting to struggle with the hollowness of feeling like talking about it just to gain internet brownie points. And I am not accusing everyone of doing that. Please be clear, I am not accusing like my fellow booktubers of doing that. I'm just saying how it started to feel to me and my participation in it. And I was already contemplating this, but a lot of it was crystallized and spurred by a comment I received actually very shortly after the first Gaiman news came out. And to be clear before I read this, because I know so many of my followers are very protective of me and I love you guys so much, this did not upset me. This was not a comment that I made me spiral, anything like that. I just thought it was a really interesting illustration of kind of everything I've been talking about. And the comment says, "Such a pity you don't care about all of the women he's assaulted, etc." Despite the fact that this comment was written on a video that literally had a timestamp that was clearly before the news came out by several months, I couldn't help but wonder, What was this person's end goal? What were they hoping to accomplish by this post? Because if they were curious, if I knew, or if their goal was to spread awareness, this tone of voice has no choice but to make the receiver of it immediately defensive. There is no other response to an accusation than defense. If this person really wanted to inform me, they might have started with a question like, did you hear about the Gaiman news? Then they could go into it and maybe spread awareness. But that couldn't have been the goal because you wouldn't have come out the gate so on attack. Second, let's say this person somehow knew that I didn't believe the women, that I was on Gaiman's side and I was still fully supporting him and none of it mattered to me. Then what does this comment accomplish? It still doesn't accomplish spreading awareness for other people watching my video because it doesn't really say anything. It doesn't help abused women. It doesn't take money out of Gaiman's pocket. Like, it doesn't end his career. It doesn't protect assaulted women. And like I said, it doesn't even work as an informing of other people besides myself. The only thing I can conclude that this type of comment accomplishes is to feel good about themselves as a way for them to feel morally superior. That doesn't really do much to help the women who are assaulted or who will be assaulted in the future, does it? So, we could discuss till the ends of the earth morality in art and the morality of creators and when it is moral or amoral to read or consume that art and whether or not it's a reflection on us, whether we take good and bad art and if moral people make good or bad art. But I just couldn't help thinking today that I wanted to come with more concrete, actionable items. This advice is really for myself, but maybe some of you can feel it too. Gaiman is not the first, and he won't be the last. This will happen again. It's not if, it's when. So how will I react to this news in a way going forward that is actionable? If you were as disturbed and upset and angry at the news as I was, what can we do about it? Unlike the Instagram post I mentioned earlier in 2020 on my personal account, I can admit that I do have a platform here. I know that I have influenced people to buy books, they have told me, and I am positive I influenced people to buy Gaiman books. So personally, for me, I will no longer be advertising Gaiman books. I will no longer be talking about them, and I will definitely no longer be reading a single word that man puts out. I hope that I will never lead to another sale. Additionally, I have also demonetized the videos where I talked about Gaiman, so my Good Omens video and the ranking video, so that I earn no money from those views that I get on those videos. I may still delete them. I don't know how I feel about that yet. In some ways, I feel like it's a little dishonest almost, like disingenuous, like I'm trying to pretend that the life I lived wasn't there. So I don't know, that may change, and I'm allowing myself the grace to change my mind on that in the future if I'd like to delete them. This is not even a drop in the bucket about ending Gaiman's career, but I can hope that if I take this action and others also take that action, that eventually the money will dry up and he will no longer have a writing career. I can only control myself, and that's what I can control. Something else small that I've done is I've always and historically been very vocal about abuse topics in fantasy, and I will continue to be doing that. So now I was wondering, what can I do to help abuse victims? I know I can't directly help the people abused by Gaiman, but I can maybe help people in my community or in my state who are being abused. So I decided I'm going to donate all of the AdSense revenue I get from this video to the national company RAIN, which is a nonprofit charity for victims of sexual abuse. Unfortunately, there's no way for me to do this directly through YouTube's donate function, so I'll be donating at the end of every month when enough accrues to donate, and I can be posting about that in a pinned comment going forward if you guys are curious how much it ends up accruing. And just in case a few of you want to join in, I have added the fundraising to this particular video if you'd like to donate to RAIN as well. When things feel really heavy to me, and when I'm really affected by the stuff in the news, the only thing that can alleviate it is to feel like I take an action. I know that as just one person, I can't really change everything, or anything maybe, but if all of us took small, tiny actions, if we all do it, then eventually change does happen. And so to act is the only way to alleviate that heaviness for me personally. I'm still reeling from the Gaiman news, to be honest. He styled himself as an ally. He styled himself as a feminist. And dare I say, he styled himself as a good person. His words meant a lot to me and they influenced me, and that feels really icky right now. And I'm still trying to deal with the heavy emotion of the intense abuse he laid on others. I think our gut reaction to these things can often be like, and that's why you shouldn't worship celebrities and why you should never revere them. And in these conversations, the term parasocial relationship gets thrown around a bunch. And I just think that's all very silly and out of touch. As humans, it is natural for us to admire people. It would be almost impossible to stop. As humans, we like to grow and change and we like to become better. And doing that by nature has people we look up to. And yes, we're going to look up to people in our own lives. And yes, we might look up to people who are creating things that we admire. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a natural human emotion. And by the way, the people in your real life who you actually know, you can revere them and they can also disappoint you. Case in point, someone we knew in our community that was highly respected, highly revered as one of like just a really solid, good person who found out he was living a double life for a decade. These things are going to happen. And the gut reaction of like, we'll never admire anyone ever again is just kind of unrealistic. The most we can ever do is just act on that information when it comes out and take it as it comes. I hope any of these ramblings on morality and art and morality of the artist and action has meant anything to you. And I recognize this is a rambly video, and if you made it this far, thank you, I guess. This video was honestly, I made this one for me. I needed to talk about it and I needed to get it off my chest and just kind of process what happened. And so if any of you are kind of in that same boat, I hope this helped in any way. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye.